Chapter 1. The Spark. Maya had always prided herself on her restraint. She was the woman who measured her words like a chemist mixing compounds, each syllable calculated to reveal nothing more than necessary. Her choices were deliberate, her emotions locked in a vault so tight even she sometimes forgot where the key was. She'd built a life on control. Her job as a paralegal demanded it, her friendships survived on it, and her bed stayed cold because of it. But that carefully constructed control fucking shattered the moment she saw him. He was slouched against the brick wall of the coffee shop, looking like he'd been carved from the city itself, raw, unpolished, and utterly unapologetic. One scuffed boot crossed over the other, his arms folded tight across a chest that strained the seams of a leather jacket, worn to hell at the cuffs. His dark hair was a mess, too long, curling at the nape of his neck like he hadn't seen a barber in months. A faint scar sliced through his left eyebrow, giving him a look that was equal parts dangerous and magnetic. He wasn't pretty, not in the Instagram-filtered way the men in her office were, but he was the kind of man who made you feel like you were the only one breathing in a room full of people. She almost didn't stop walking. Almost. But his eyes caught her. Dark, sharp, and unyielding. They tracked her like a predator sizing up prey. Slow and deliberate. Not a flicker of hesitation. He didn't look away when she met his gaze, didn't soften the edges of his stare. It was like he'd been waiting for her, like he knew she'd pass by this exact spot, on this exact street, at this exact moment. The audacity of it made her skin prickle. She pushed through the coffee shop door, her heels clicking too loudly on the hardwood floor. The barista, a bored 20-something with a nose ring, barely looked up as Maya ordered her usual black latte, no sugar, no small talk. But her pulse was a traitor, hammering in her throat, loud enough she swore the whole damn shop could hear it. She told herself it was ridiculous. He was just some guy, some asshole with too much confidence and a leather fetish. Nothing special. Except when she turned around, latte burning her palm through the cup, he was there. Closer now. Too close. His presence filled the space like smoke, curling into every corner of her awareness. He was taller than she'd thought, broad in a way that made the small shop feel smaller. And he smelled faintly of leather and something sharper, like gasoline or cedar. "You always move that fast?" His voice was a low growl, rough as gravel, with a faint drawl that made her think of whiskey and bad decisions. She blinked, caught off guard. "Excuse me?" He leaned a fraction closer, just enough for her to notice the faint stubble on his jaw, the kind that would rasp against skin in the dark. "You walked past me like you were running from something, or to something." Her throat tightened, heat creeping up her neck despite her best efforts to stay cool. "I wasn't running," she said, her voice sharper than she meant, "and I'm not late." "Good." His mouth curled into a half smile, slow and dangerous, like he was savoring a secret. "Be a damned shame if you were." The words were simple. But the way he said them, low, deliberate, like he was tasting every syllable, made her legs feel unsteady. There was nothing polite about it, nothing safe. It was the kind of voice that could talk a woman out of her clothes and into a world of trouble before she realized what was happening. She tried to brush past him, aiming for a small corner table by the window, but the air felt thicker now, charged with something she couldn't name. She sat, crossing her legs tightly, and took a sip of her latte, hoping the bitterness would ground her. It didn't. Then she heard the deliberate scrape of boots on wood. He didn't ask, didn't hesitate, just dropped into the chair across from her, his long legs sprawling under the table, one knee brushing hers for a split second before he pulled back. The contact sent a jolt through her, sharp and unwelcome. You always this serious when you drink coffee? He asked, his eyes locked on hers, unblinking, like he was peeling back her skin to see what was underneath. She set her cup down, harder than necessary. I like serious things, she said, aiming for cold, for distance, but her voice betrayed her, coming out softer, almost inviting. That fucking grin again, slow, wolfish, the kind that made her think of teeth and heat and things that happened in dark rooms. Good, he said, leaning back, his jacket creaking. I like serious women. Her chest tightened, her breath catching in a way that pissed her off. This wasn't a rom-com meet-cute with shy smiles and spilled coffee. This was a goddamn ambush. His gaze didn't waver, didn't drift to his phone or the barista or the street outside. It stayed on her, heavy and unrelenting, like he was daring her to look away first. She didn't. You don't even know me, she said, her voice low, a challenge. Don't need to know you to see you, he replied, his tone matching hers, but with an edge that made her skin hum. You're wound tight, aren't you? Like you're afraid of what happens if you let go. Her jaw clenched. You're awfully cocky for a guy who's crashing my coffee break. He laughed, a low, rough sound that vibrated through her. Cocky's one word for it. Honest's another. Honest, she arched a brow, leaning forward slightly, her elbows on the table. You think you've got me figured out in, what, 2 minutes? I think I've got enough. He tilted his head, studying her like she was a puzzle he was already halfway to solving. You're the kind of woman who's got a 5-year plan, a tidy apartment, and a vibrator in the nightstand because you don't trust anyone enough to let them touch you. Her breath caught, heat flooding her face, not embarrassment, but something hotter, angrier. You're out of line, she snapped, but her voice shook just enough to betray her. Maybe. He shrugged, unapologetic, his eyes glinting with something dark and knowing. But I'm not wrong. The air between them crackled, thick with tension that felt like it could spark into flame. She wanted to slap him, or kiss him, or both, and the confusion of it made her dizzy. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping back, her latte forgotten. Enjoy your coffee, she said, aiming for dismissive, but landing somewhere closer to breathless. He stood too, slower, more deliberate, his movements fluid like he had all the time in the fucking world. He was close enough now that she could feel the heat radiating off him, could see the faint pulse at the base of his throat. You always this easy to read? He asked, his voice softer now, but no less dangerous. I'm not easy, she shot back, her eyes narrowing, her pulse hammering so loud she was sure he could hear it. Didn't say you were. That grin again, lazy and predatory, just said I can read you. And the worst part, he fucking could. She felt it in the way her body betrayed her flushed cheeks, her unsteady hands, the way her thighs pressed together under her skirt like she could lock out the heat pooling low in her belly. She turned and walked out, her heels clicking faster now, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it might crack her ribs. The cool September air hit her like a slap, but it didn't clear her head. She hated that she was smiling, a small, private, secret smile that clung to her lips the entire way home, like a stain she couldn't wipe off. She hated that she wanted to turn back, to see if he was still watching her. And most of all, she hated that she knew, deep down, this wasn't the last time she'd see him. Chapter 2. The Push. Maya couldn't shake him. That smug bastard from the coffee shop had burrowed under her skin like a splinter, and no amount of logic or late-night wine could dislodge him. His grin, crooked, sharp, like he knew exactly what kind of trouble he could cause, haunted her. The gravelly edge of his voice played on a loop in her head, low and rough, like he'd smoked one too many cigarettes or fucked one too many women in the back of a bar. And worst of all, the way he'd looked at her, like he could see every crack in her carefully curated armor, made her feel naked in a way that wasn't entirely unpleasant. She told herself it was a one-off, a random encounter with a cocky stranger who'd probably forgotten her the second she walked away. That's how the world worked. Strangers collided, rattled your cage, and vanished into the void. She'd go back to her tidy life, her paralegal desk stacked with case files, her yoga classes, her vibrator that saw more action than any man had in years. Except the universe, apparently, had other fucking plans. 3 days later, she saw him again. The grocery store, of all goddamn places, at 7 p.m. on a Thursday when she was just trying to grab some kale and almond milk to pretend she had her shit together. He was in the produce aisle, leaning against a display of apples like he owned the place, his sleeves shoved up to his elbows, exposing forearms corded with muscle and dusted with dark hair. He was turning a Granny Smith over in one hand, his fingers moving with a slow, deliberate grace that made her think of how those hands might feel elsewhere, on her hips, her thighs, her throat. She froze at the end of the aisle, her reusable canvas grocery bag digging into her shoulder, her heart doing a traitorous little flip. Her first instinct was to bolt, to duck into the canned goods aisle and pretend she hadn't seen him. But then his eyes flicked up, locking onto hers like a missile finding its target. Of course he saw her. Of course he fucking smiled. "Well, well, darlin'," he drawled, his voice dripping with that same low, smoky edge that had haunted her for days. "You don't know me," she snapped, the words automatic, a reflex to keep him at arm's length. But her voice came out shakier than she wanted, and she hated herself for it. He tilted his head, his grin widening, sharp and predatory. "Not yet." The words hit her like a shot of bourbon, warm and heavy, pooling low in her stomach. She forgot what she'd come to the store for. Kale, milk, control, whatever. All she could feel was the weight of his gaze, the way it stripped her bare without a single touch. He didn't move closer, not right away. He just stood there, one boot propped against the display, letting the space between them hum with something dangerous. It was a power move, she realized, making her feel the distance, daring her to close it. And fuck, part of her wanted to. "You following me?" she asked, trying to sound annoyed instead of intrigued, her fingers tightening around the handle of her bag like it could anchor her. He chuckled, a low, dirty sound that made her thighs clench. "You wish, sweetheart." He tossed the apple from one hand to the other, his movements lazy but precise, his eyes never leaving hers. His attention was a physical thing, heavy and unrelenting, pinning her in place without a single finger on her skin. She could smell him from here, leather, cedar, and something sharper, like the faint tang of motor oil or sweat. It was intoxicating, and she hated how much she liked it. "Why are you looking at me like that?" she asked, her voice quieter now, betraying the heat creeping up her neck. He raised a brow, the scar through it catching the fluorescent light. "Like what?" "Like you already know what I'm going to say." She lifted her chin, trying to regain some ground, but it felt like a losing battle. He took a step forward, just one, slow and deliberate, his boots scuffing the linoleum. The air between them thickened, charged with something that made her pulse stutter. "Because I do." Her breath caught, and she cursed herself for it. "You think you're clever," she said, her voice sharp, but the edge was dulled by the way her body was reacting, heart racing, skin tingling, a traitorous warmth pooling between her legs. "Nah." Another step, close enough now that she could see the faint stubble on his jaw, the way his lips curved like he was holding back a laugh. "I think I'm honest. And I think you like it more than you want to admit." The words slid under her skin like a blade, sharp and hot. She should walk away, turn on her heel, grab her fucking kale, and get the hell out of there. But her feet were glued to the floor, her body betraying her brain, and all she could do was stand there, staring into those dark eyes that seemed to see too much. "You don't know what I like," she said, but it came out softer, almost a challenge, and she regretted it the second it left her mouth. His grin turned wicked, his gaze dropping briefly to her lips before snapping back to her eyes. "Bet I could guess." Her hand tightened on her bag, the canvas biting into her palm. The aisle felt too small, the store too quiet, like the world had narrowed to just the two of them and the electric current crackling in the space between. She opened her mouth to say something, anything, to cut through the tension, but before she could, he reached out, plucked another apple from the display, and turned it over in his hand, his fingers brushing the fruit in a way that felt obscene. "Trust me," he said, his voice low enough to make her shiver. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off him, and dropped the apple into her bag. His fingers lingered for a split second, not touching her, but near enough that she felt the ghost of them. This one's better. Then he moved past her, slow and deliberate, his shoulder brushing hers just enough to send a jolt through her entire body. The contact was fleeting but deliberate, like he knew exactly what he was doing to her. She caught the scent of him again, leather, sweat, trouble, and it made her dizzy. He didn't look back, just kept walking, his boots echoing faintly as he disappeared around the corner of the aisle. Maya stood there, staring at the apple in her bag like it was a goddamn grenade. Her heart was pounding, her skin too tight, her panties uncomfortably damp. She was in trouble, deep, reckless, stupid trouble. And the worst part? The part that made her want to scream or laugh or maybe both? She was starting to like it. Chapter 3. The Almost. The rain had started just before dusk, a thin drizzle that thickened into a relentless downpour, soaking the streets and smearing every traffic light into a blurry neon halo. Maya hadn't planned on going out that night. Her apartment, tidy, quiet, safe, was supposed to be enough. But the walls felt too close, the silence too loud, and the memory of him, that smug, gravel-voiced bastard from the coffee shop and the grocery store, was a splinter lodged in her brain. His grin, his eyes, the way he'd looked at her like he could unravel her with a single word, it was driving her fucking insane. She needed noise, heat, something to drown out the way her body kept betraying her with every fleeting thought of him. So she ended up at the Rusty Anchor, a dive bar on the edge of town where the air smelled like stale beer and wet leather. It was packed, bodies pressed close in the dim light, laughter and clinking glasses cutting through the low thrum of a jukebox playing some old Springsteen track. She found a stool in the corner, ordered a whiskey neat, fuck her usual wine. She needed something that burned, and tried to look like she wasn't waiting for someone, like she wasn't hoping against every shred of common sense that he'd somehow materialize again. She was halfway through her drink, the liquor searing her throat, when she heard it, that low, unhurried voice that hit her like a punch to the gut. "You stalking me now, sweetheart?" Her stomach flipped, and she turned, slow, like she could delay the inevitable. There he was, standing too close, rain still clinging to his leather jacket, dark hair damp and curling at the ends, his grin cutting through the bar's smoky haze like a goddamn switchblade. Water dripped from his hair onto his collarbone, visible where his black t-shirt gaped slightly, and she hated how her eyes lingered there, on the hollow of his throat, before snapping back to his face. "You wish," she shot back, throwing his own words from the grocery store at him, her voice sharper than she felt. Her pulse was already betraying her, hammering too loud, too fast. His grin widened, slow and lazy, like she'd just passed some test she didn't know she was taking. "Good girl," he said, pulling out the stool next to hers without asking, his movements all fluid confidence. "Would have ruined the fun if you were too easy." Her drink arrived, the glass sweating in her hand. She took a sip, too fast, too deliberate, trying to ignore the way he leaned one elbow on the bar, his body angled toward her like she was the only fucking thing in the room worth looking at. The leather of his jacket creaked faintly, and she caught his scent. Rain, cedar, and something darker, like the faint musk of sweat or sex. It made her thighs clench under the bar, and she cursed herself for it. "You always show up where I am?" she asked, aiming for casual but landing somewhere closer to breathless, her fingers tightening around her glass. He tilted his head, his eyes glinting with something dangerous under the bar's shitty lighting. "Maybe you just keep showing up where I am," he said, his voice low, teasing, but with an edge that made her skin prickle. "Starting to think you like it." She laughed, short and sharp, trying to claw back some control. "You're very sure of yourself, aren't you?" He leaned in, just enough that she could feel the heat of him, the air between them shrinking to nothing. "No," he said, his breath brushing her ear, close enough to make her shiver. "I'm very sure of you." Her breath hitched, a traitor to her composure, and she hated how he noticed, how his eyes flicked to her lips, then back to her eyes, like he was cataloging every reaction. The noise of the bar, the clatter of glasses, the hum of conversation, the jukebox whining about glory days, faded to a dull roar, drowned out by the thundering of her pulse. He didn't touch her, didn't need to. His presence was a physical thing, wrapping around her like smoke, heavy and inescapable. "You make a habit of cornering women like this?" she asked, trying to sound sharp, but her voice came out softer, huskier, like she was already halfway to giving in. He smirked, leaning back slightly, but his eyes stayed locked on hers, dark and unrelenting. "Only the ones who look like they want to be cornered." Her heart slammed against her ribs, and she felt a flush crawl up her neck, hot and incriminating. She should have walked away, should have laughed in his face, called him an arrogant prick, and left him sitting there with his smug grin. But her body wasn't listening to her brain. Her body was too busy noticing the way his fingers drummed lightly on the bar, the way his shoulders filled out his jacket, the way his lips looked like they'd taste like whiskey and trouble. "Maybe I do," she said, the words slipping out before she could stop them, surprising her with their boldness. Her own voice sounded foreign, low and daring, like she was someone else entirely. His smile turned feral, a slow, dangerous thing that made her stomach twist and her panties feel uncomfortably tight. "Good," he said, his voice dropping to a rough whisper, like he was sharing a secret meant only for her. "Makes things easier." Then he reached out, not to touch her skin, but to brush a single raindrop from the sleeve of her jacket, his fingers lingering just long enough for her to feel the weight of the gesture. It was nothing, a simple fucking motion, but it set her entire body alight, every nerve ending sparking like a live wire. Her breath caught, and she didn't realize she was holding it until he pulled his hand back, his eyes never leaving hers, dark and knowing. "You should go home," he said, his voice quieter now, rougher, like he was fighting some internal battle. It wasn't a request, not a dismissal, it was a dare, laced with something that made her think of tangled sheets and bruised lips. Maya swallowed hard, her throat dry despite the whiskey, her heart pounding so loud she was sure he could hear it. She was caught, teetering on the edge of something reckless. Stay and see how far this could go, or walk away and pretend she wasn't already craving him. She didn't answer right away, just held his gaze, letting the silence stretch, letting the heat between them build until it felt like the air might ignite. When she finally slid off the stool, her legs unsteady, she didn't look back. She pushed through the crowd, the door creaking as she stepped into the rain-soaked night, her skin still burning from the weight of his stare. She didn't need to turn around to know he was watching her, that fucking grin still plastered on his face. And as she walked away, the rain soaking through her clothes, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just stepped over a line she wouldn't be able to cross back.